beide paai.
Welcome to this week's edition of It is Chaile Time, and we had our Harmony People Network Praise for Impact conference last week, Tuesday and Wednesday, and I want to thank every single person who sponsored, companies who sponsored, every person who joined us and who participated in a hugely successful conference. At the end of the day, the purpose of the Harmony People Network is really to support HR managers, professionals, administrators, HRBPs, and people in the legal profession. So just thank you. You can just click on the link below somewhere in the description and you can look at some of the feedback videos and a gallery of photos and so on. So what are we dealing with today? Today, I want to talk about a recent experience of mine, actually something that I'm still currently dealing with in terms of strikes, in terms of lockouts. My title is Crossing the Line When Unions Go Rogue. So hopefully we can learn a bit from this experience and just some thoughts on the legal aspects of this whole situation. So I was called to a client in Cape Town in which the staff, it's over 100 of the staff in a certain division, went on an illegal and unprotected strike. Now this company, they operate under the jurisdiction of the MEIBC Bargaining Council. Now for those of you who may not necessarily know, a bargaining council is really an entity which are formed by the employers and the employers' organizations on the one hand, and employees and their trade unions on the other hand in the industry. They come together for purposes to collectively bargain, typically on benefits, terms and conditions of employment, wages. And it also deals a service of very similar to that of the CCMA as far as dispute resolution is concerned. So typically if there's a dismissal dispute, then instead of referring a dispute to the CCMA per se, you will refer it to the bargaining council. So I flew down to Cape Town and only to find that the reason why the staff are on a strike, which was an unprotected strike, so we're going to touch base quickly what is the difference between a protected and an unprotected strike. But they went on an unprotected strike because of which relates really to a certain provision in the Bargaining Council main agreement. Now, a Bargaining Council main agreement obviously have legal effect, you understand, so you need to, the parties in that industry needs to adhere to the provisions of the Bargaining Council, and in this case, it dealt with inclement weather. So the people we're referring to, they are predominantly painters, sandblasters or so, and you can't really paint or do sandblasting when it is raining. So there's a provision in the main agreement that says the heading is inclement weather, and I specifically want to refer to clause 2.1.3. If employees are informed the day before not to report for work on that or subsequent days because work will not be possible due to inclement weather, then no payment will be made for that day. So this is what the main issue in dispute was about. The employer, obviously every single day they will look at the weather forecast, for the next day or couple of following days, and in this specific instance it was found that the next day the forecast was forecasting rain, and naturally the people can't work. So indeed the employer informed the employees the day before that, look, tomorrow, the next day, you don't have to come to work because of inclement weather, and naturally it goes without pay. Clause 2.2, however, does state that notwithstanding the above, employees shall be paid not less than 66% of their weekly wage, irrespective of the number of hours by which the hours for that week were reduced due to inclement weather. So even though the employer are not obliged to pay for that specific day or days, the employer must at least still cover 66% of the weekly wage of the staff. So here we are, all the staff are members of a specific trade union, and all of the staff went on an unprotected strike. Now, quickly, what is a protected strike? Now, basically, a protected strike is when an employee or employee party or a union on behalf of their members apply to the CCMA for a process of conciliation in order to discuss the underlying matter of mutual interest. Now, this is also interesting, There's this whole situation or argument about a dispute of right versus a dispute of interest, mutual interest. Typically, you can't really strike on a matter that can be arbitrated. So, for instance, let's say minimum wage, national minimum wage. If an employer is not paying the national minimum wage, it is simply easy to arbitrate or to adjudicate a dispute like that. So, you don't typically go on a strike for that. So, for strike action, you typically file a dispute of mutual interest. With other words, you want to collectively bargain on salary increases, for instance, or benefits or so. But what's interesting, what I find in recent years is that unions seems to make unlawful demands and file those kind of disputes under the umbrella of mutual interest disputes. Like in this case, and I'm going to go further now down in the main agreement, that this demand of theirs to demand payment is actually, unlawful in terms of the employer having a right to stand on this specific provision, you see. Secondly, why they also went on illegal strike is because they've got a manager, who obviously is fairly new, and they say a new broom sweeps clean, so he's obviously strict, and he made some changes in the business, and it seems like the staff are not agreeing to the changes, and now they're putting pressure on the manager, and they're demanding him being suspended or transferred, and he's not allowed to talk to the staff. So I eventually explained to the union, listen, I can't interfere in the union's business. I can't start making demands of who must be suspended or removed, and similarly, you can't do that to the employer, but be that as it may. So a protected strike, in terms of Section 64 of the Labour Relations Act, that is Chapter 4, deals with strikes and lockouts. So the right to strike and the recourse to lockout. 1. Every employee has a right to strike, and every employer has the recourse to lockout if A. The issue in dispute has been referred to a council or to the commission as required by this Act, and B. In the case of a proposed strike, at least 48 hours notice of the commencement of the strike in writing has been given to the employer. And then C, in the case of proposed lockout, at least 48 hours notice of the commencement of the lockout in writing has been given to any trade union that is a party to the dispute, or if there is no such trade union, to the employees, unless the issue in dispute relates to a collective agreement to be concluded in a council, in which case notice must have been given to that council. There are some other provisions here too, in terms of a fair strike, but it's not relevant to this specific instance, so I'm not going to go through that. But that is in a nutshell how you apply or go through the process of having a protected strike. Now, in this case, the employees did not actually do so. Now, what's also interesting is that Section 37 of the main agreement continued and state that the bargaining council shall be the sole forum for negotiating matters contained in the main agreement. During the currency of the agreement, no matter contained in the agreement may be an issue in dispute for the purposes of a strike or lockout, or any conduct in contemplation of a strike or lockout. So what it is basically saying, when a matter is regulated by the bargaining council main agreement, the union or employees cannot go on a strike because of that. So it is in essence illegal to do so, but yet here we are. So how did we deal with the matter? The staff went on a strike for 3 days. We had a couple of engagements with the union and their shop stewards, their constituency, and I basically told them, look, if staff have a grievance, they need to follow the grievance procedure, and we will deal with that accordingly. It's remarking how staff and unions can go on an illegal strike, but they bypass the grievance process. So I said, no, you know what? We're not going to give in to your demands. There will be a grievance process, and if you follow the grievance process, we will deal with it. Secondly, the main agreement is quite specific. Okay. Now the union went on technicalities because it states here that if employees are informed the day before not to report the next day or subsequent days, they are of the view it must be at least 24 hours. So the employer only gave them notice at 4 o'clock the previous day. But look, that's a technicality which is irrelevant, okay? That's not what the provisions say. It just says the previous day. Obviously, on this kind of matter, you will monitor the weather forecast throughout the day to get a better understanding as to what the weather will be the next day or subsequent to the following days. So they started to try and play on technicalities. Then they start making demands that the staff must be paid for the last 3 days. And I told them there will be no pay. Okay, so number one, if you have a problem with a manager or with the company in terms of their rules, you follow the grievance process. Secondly, there will be no back pay. And yes, all of your staff are now subject to disciplinary action. So what disciplinary action? Just interesting. In this process, we gave the staff 2 ultimatums already. On day 1, we told them this is an illegal and unprotected strike, keeping in mind that in this case, 2-3 months previously, they also went on an unprotected strike. And in this case, the client of this employer also gave the employer a warning to say their contract is in jeopardy should this happen again. So previously also unprotected strike, all the staff received final warning. So that's the background, okay? None of them were dismissed. Now, secondly, we gave them a first ultimatum that they need to report back to work by 1 o'clock in that afternoon, which they didn't do. The entire day, they didn't work at all. Then the second day, we gave them a second ultimatum. They also did not adhere to that, also didn't go back to the work. Then I prepared a final ultimatum in which I gave them 15 minutes to report back to work. If not, we're going to lock them out. Now, fortunately, it was not necessary to actually issue this ultimatum, okay? But the team negotiating or consulting, I don't want to call it negotiation because I made it quite clear we're not negotiating at all. We are entertaining a consultation with them, and we're quite clear. And we've instructed them on record they need to report back for work, and this is an illegal strike. But anyway, we did inform them that there is a final ultimatum that once we issue it, within 15 minutes, if they don't go back to work, staff will be on lockdown. Now, just so interesting, should we dismiss the staff? Because that is one of the possibilities that staff can now be subjected to a disciplinary hearing and then obviously be dismissed. So we're looking at Section 191 of the Labour Relations Act. We're dealing with subsection 5, subsection B, even subsection further, 3I, okay? The employee may refer the dispute to the Labour Court for adjudication if the employee has alleged that the reason for dismissal is the employee's participation in a strike that does not comply with the provisions of Chapter 4, which I just read to you. So if employees are not on a protected strike in terms of Chapter 4, they follow the due process and they go on a strike, should the employer dismiss the staff, then the CCMA or the bargaining council, in this case the bargaining council, they will have the jurisdiction to conciliate the dispute, but they will not have the jurisdiction to arbitrate the dispute. Then the employees must actually file for adjudication at the Labour Court. Now, interesting is what employees typically in a situation like this will do, and if you're an HR manager or IR manager, you must be aware of this. You must take note of what it says here. The employee may refer the dispute to the Labour Court for adjudication if the employee alleges, okay, that the reason for the dismissal relates to unprotected strike. Now, I've dealt with this a few times before. I've not seen employees or unions file a dispute that relates to unprotected strike, a dismissal dispute. They will typically file a dismissal dispute that relates to reasons that is unknown. So in a situation like that, the commissioner at the CCMA or the bargaining council will still entertain the dispute because they need to determine whether they have jurisdiction or not. Some time back I dealt with in the road freight industries, same thing, where we also dismiss a lot of truck drivers because of participating in the illegal strikes. So in that case, we were engaged in a arbitration at the bargaining council, the National Road Freight for the Bargaining Council Industries, for almost a year, and only at the end of the year, the commissioner then threw the case out and said, listen, you guys were indeed dismissed for reasons relating to an unprotected strike, even though they had a bit of a smokescreen here, trying to make this as a strike for reasons unknown. So that is a bit of a tactic of the union. You need to really go out and prove that these individuals were actually part of a strike. It comes to mind now. Let's just deal with section 213 of the Labor Relations Act. There you go. In section 213 of the Labor Relations Act, you will find the definitions of certain provisions in the LRA, and one of them are, what does a strike mean? Okay, a strike means the partial or complete concerted refusal to work, or the retardation or obstruction of work by persons who are or have been employed by the same employer or by different employers for the purpose of remedying a grievance or resolving a dispute in the respect of any matter of mutual interest between the employer and employee, and every reference to work in this definition includes overtime work, whether it is voluntary or compulsory. So, yes, the conduct of the employees in this case constitutes an illegal strike. So, on the last day, we actually gave the instruction for the HR representatives to go and issue the final ultimatum that within 15 minutes will initiate the lockout. Then, because of the lockout, this is what is called a defensive lockout. We would have found a short-term relief workers to actually replace the staff while the disciplinary processes go on. So interesting is, as we walked out with the ultimatum, staff start jumping into the staff buses and they went back to work. So that is a situation. Something that is unfortunate for me, I had some meetings with the union also. It does seem that the union at first was not really involved. The union didn't even know the staff were on strike. And when I spoke to a shop steward, they also told me the staff is just doing what they want. And this is something that is taking track now, where staff get influenced by political parties, I suppose in order to garnish voters for national or local government elections or so. So it seems like the unions are starting to get competition from politicians, which is also very unfortunate towards the unions, because the political parties venturing into that space is obviously illegal. Staff has the right to freedom of association, and from a collective bargaining and a representation perspective, a registered trade union has the right to represent their members, not political parties. So it's very unfortunate. The feedback we got from the ground is that people are being influenced by certain political parties, and which put the union also in a very difficult situation. But be that as it may, at the end of the day, the employer office now reserves the right to institute disciplinary action to the staff, subsection to the discipline hearings, and who knows where that may lead. So that is for this day. Illegal strikes, it's very unfortunate it happens. Employees being influenced by political parties. What constitutes a fair and protected strike? What recourse employers got in terms of lockout and disciplinary action? Hopefully there was some tips and tools of trade that could have been learned here. Somebody's just trying to phone me. Thank you so much for joining this week in Chaile Time. See you next week, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Let's have a look at some of the vacancies posted nationwide on our Harmony People's Network this week. First up, UG Underground Mining is on the lookout for a training specialist in Rustenburg. And then in Kempton Park, there is an opportunity for an electrical and instrumentation engineer. An innovative and fast-growing online betting startup based in Umhlanga is seeking 2 meticulous, proactive, and detail-oriented finance administrators to join the team, and Ballum House has an opening for a marketing specialist. For the full information of the mentioned positions, how to apply, as well as more available positions, find the vacancy link in the description. You will also find a link to a useful video on how to compose a winning CV and have a successful interview. Tune in again next week for more Harmony vacancies.